any questions about OET, anything that's like a pressing concern that you want answered, please pop it into the chat now and I'll do my best to answer that for you. Any questions whatsoever? Any questions whatsoever? We might actually start off with a little Q&A this morning. Just while we're connecting this up and getting started, if you have any questions. Okay, that's working. Cool. All right, now I'm fully focused. So any questions just to start off before we begin looking at the speaking? Any questions at all? What have you got? Maybe all the questions have been answered. Okay, so Choi Lin's booked the test for the 24th of October, but it's been cancelled. I'm guessing that's for because of the situation in Melbourne with the stage 4 lockdown. Although I thought by the 24th we were going to open. Anyway, you'll just have to keep checking back on the official website. Farhad's got a question, which is, in the speaking, do we need to speak in an academic tone? No, it's not an academic English test. The tone in which you speak and the appropriateness of your vocabulary is being polite, okay? The speaking is about being polite. That's the key here. Certainly not academic, friendly and polite, okay? That's what you should be aiming for. Amani. Yes, so Amani, you'll have to, hopefully you've booked your study plan consultation already. Because you're a pharmacist, you'll have different material and the teacher will provide that material to you. Doctors and nurses, it's a different thing. Other professions have a different course. So book your study plan consultation with your teacher. And if you get confused, you can always email hello@e2language.com and we will get back to you. Okay, Mega's got a question about how we can start the home visit role play. We'll talk about that today because we're going to go into depth about speaking. Susan, are Americanisms considered less than British? No, that won't be considered at all. So that's fine. I mean, there's very little difference between American English and British English. Obviously, there's an accent difference, which you will not be penalized if you have an American accent. In terms of Americanisms, like phrases, specific phrases, you'll probably use very few. Again, using quite polite, friendly, polite language, but no, you will not be penalized. Mahmoud, I booked my exam on the computer. Regarding part A reading, any tips to solve on the computer, as I usually use on paper and I find it easy? Yeah, okay. So reading part A is a bit of a trick. What you want to do, Mahmoud, is go to the official OET website and they have some example videos showing what reading part A, how it's formatted on the screen. As far as I remember, on the left-hand side, you have your text, which you can scroll back and forth between the 4 texts. On the right-hand side, you have your questions, okay? So that's how it works. The E2 language online reading part A is very similar, except we have them at the text at the top and the questions at the bottom. Okay, so yes, good idea to practice on e2language.com for your computer-based OET test because we are computer-based preparation. Zara, do they provide us with pens and pencils on test A? Yes. Jotan, mock test plus. What makes us know we are ready for B grade? Well, what our mock test really does, first and foremost, is give you feedback on your weak areas so you know what to improve upon so you can get the B. We do give you an indicative score, okay, but it is an indicative score. It's not, we can't guarantee that you're going to get that score. It's probably pretty close. But the purpose of the mock test is for us to point out your weak areas and for you to then work on those weak areas. That's the best possible way you can go about preparing, really. Daniela, in the writing, a spelling errors like a missing S in plural is going to be marked wrong. Yes, you will be penalized for spelling. It's not weighted heavily, but just be careful of little things like that. Abira, I am a beginner in OET prep. I have booked my test for the 5th of December. Can you please explain speaking section? Yes, we're going to do that today. Fahar, do they reduce marks for my accent? The answer is no. But the answer is yes, if your accent actually affects your pronunciation. Everybody has an accent. I have an accent. You have an accent. My friends have a different accent, slightly different. If I have friends from overseas who speak English, we all have different accents. That's completely fine. The key, though, is with your accent that it's not impeding your pronunciation. So you're still able to enunciate, pronounce each of the different sounds of English clearly, okay? But if you're a Spanish speaker and you're saying y instead of j, for example, or uh, or the other way around, you're saying yesterday instead of yesterday, that's problematic. Or if you're an Indian speaker and you're saying vomit instead of vomit, that's a problem because the w and the v are mixed up, or the y and the j are mixed up. So just be careful of little first language interference issues. Okay, cool. We're getting lots of questions about speaking. So we might get started actually, or else I'll be sitting here doing a Q&A. Let's get started. Oh, there we go. There's E2 language. Okay, cool. Hello, everybody. My name is Jay. I'm one of the expert OET teachers here at E2 Language. In this live class, we're going to do a workshop on speaking, and we're going to look specifically at the clinical communication criteria. That is the checklist that the examiners use when they're marking your speaking, okay? What happens is on test day, you'll do 2 role plays. The role plays are going to be recorded on a device and then sent to examiners. I believe they're here in Melbourne. What the examiners then do is they listen to your recordings. They have criteria, okay, a checklist. And there's lots of these criteria. And they get their pen and they go, okay, the first one, how did you go out of, we'll look at this in more detail. Second one, third one, etc. And they're marking you according to this checklist. So there's 2 parts of the checklist. There's a checklist on language elements like pronunciation, grammar, vocabulary, etc. And there's a checklist on like bedside manner, clinical communication skills. And we're going to look at that in depth, okay? The language is one thing, the clinical communication is another. If you're just getting started with the OET, you've never taken this test before and you're a little bit unsure about how it all functions and operates and you're not sure how you'll go, you should check out our mini mock test with feedback. This actually simulates the OET test. It's all done on the computer. You'll take the listening, reading, and writing in one sitting. Then you'll actually book a one-on-one speaking mock test with one of our teachers. Then you're going to get lots of feedback and reporting on all the different skills there, okay? Including writing feedback and speaking feedback. This is the best way to get started. Or if you have actually taken the OET test before and you've been unsuccessful, but you don't really know why, this will provide you feedback so you know what to work on next. Anyway, as I mentioned, back on speaking. So you scored on 2 things, language skills and clinical skills. Let's take a look in more depth at the language skills. You scored on 4 aspects of language. There's actually more because each of these incorporate different elements, different aspects. First one is intelligibility. Intelligibility refers to your clarity of speech according to standard English pronunciation. Really, you can think about this as how easily are you understood? So if you're speaking to me, for example, and your speech is just very clear and your pronunciation is very clear, I can understand you immediately. If, however, you have a thick accent that is impeding your pronunciation, it might take me a few little microseconds to sort of think, oh, what was that word? Oh, that word. That's intelligibility. So you need to be easily understood on test day. Fluency refers to the tempo of your speech. Okay, you want to speak at a moderate pace on test day, not too quickly, not too slowly. But fluency also refers to how easily or how effortlessly you can speak. Okay, that is, you're not searching for vocabulary and grammar to say something. Your language is appearing immediately. Okay, and also you're not hesitating and you're not going etc. All of that's part of fluency, okay? You can think about fluency as your delivery. How is your delivery? Appropriateness is what we discussed at the beginning. So appropriateness is the sort of tone that you'll take. That will include Appropriateness is kind of, think about it like the social context. Think about it like what you need with appropriateness is politeness. Okay. You're polite, and very friendly. Okay. And very caring. Um, that's sort of incorporated in the tone of voice, also in vocabulary as well. D is grammar and expression. This is the nuts and bolts of language. This is vocabulary and grammar and phrases, for example, natural sounding phrases. So that's the language side of things. Hopefully, you have got that all under control. Each of these will be scored out of 6. So you get 6 for each of these. Okay. And again, the examiner will be listening and giving you a score out of 6 for intelligibility, fluency, etc. What we're going to focus on today is the clinical skills. And the reason why I want to focus on this is because here you can get points more easily. Okay. Even if your language skills aren't great, if you know what they're listening for in terms of the clinical skills, you can maximize your score. You can boost your score by incorporating certain things or not incorporating certain things into your role play. So let's have a closer look at clinical skills. So there are 5 main criteria for the clinical skills. They include relationship building, incorporating and understanding the patient's perspective, providing structure to your dialogue, information gathering, that is the questions that you ask. There's a certain way that you ask questions. And then information giving, that is, there's a certain way that you should be making recommendations, suggestions, advising, etc. Each of these have sub-criteria, okay? Each of these is scored out of 3. So let's take a look at that first one, which is relationship building, okay? And this incorporates 4 subcategories. Okay, relationship building refers to your ability to start the conversation, be attentive, be non-judgmental, and show empathy. So let's take a look at how you can start the conversation here. First thing I'll say about starting the conversation is this. On test day, you are the medical professional in the role play. Yes, you're in a situation that is not your clinic, okay? It's not where you work, etc. And you might be a little bit anxious, etc., or whatever. When the role play starts, you need to take control of the role play because the interlocutor, the person you're speaking to, is not the medical professional. They're the patient or they're the relative of the patient. They will sit there just like in your clinic. It's up to you to start, initiate the conversation, keep the conversation going, etc. So how can you start the conversation? Well, it depends. You might say, "Hi, Mrs. Smith, my name is Dr. J. Thanks for coming to see me. Now, I understand that you are having some issues with your medications. Is that right? How did I say this, or where did this come from?" In the role play card that you get on test day, there's a scenario. Okay, this is at the top of the role play card. You'll have setting and then scenario. And the scenario gives you the background information about the patient. What's going on, what's been happening to this patient, and what is your relationship with this patient. Maybe you know the patient already because she's your patient and she's coming to see you again, or she's coming for a follow-up, or she's coming to check her test results, etc. In which case you can greet her and say, "Hello, Mrs. Smith, good to see you again." Or maybe you've never met this patient before and you can say, "Hello, Mrs. Smith." You can introduce yourself. "My name is Dr. J. Thanks for coming to see me." Now, looking at the scenario here, I understand you've been having issues with your medications. Let's talk about this today. So that's how you start the conversation. If you screw this up, it's not the end of the world. And what I recommend you do, if you're unsure if you know the patient or not, or if you're unsure about the patient's name, in the preparation time for the role play, you have 2 or 3 minutes to prepare. That's when you can ask the interlocutor, "Excuse me, do I know you in this role play?" And they'll say, "Yes, you do." You say, "Okay." And then the second question, "What do you want me to call you in this role play?" And they'll say, "Oh, you can call me Mr. Smith." You say, "Okay, fine." So then you know when the role play starts that you know Mr. Smith and you say, "Hello, Mr. Smith. Good to see you again. How are you feeling?" Blah, 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 blah. Attentiveness is critical. This should run throughout the entire role play, you being attentive. What does that mean? It means you need to listen carefully and respond appropriately. Although this is a speaking test, it is very much as well a listening test, okay? Because you need to listen carefully in order to speak appropriately, respond appropriately. Being attentive comes from responding appropriately, but there's also ways that you can signal to the examiner that you're being attentive. One of them is when you're listening, you're reflecting back what the patient's saying. Okay, so the patient's talking about, listen, I've had a really hard day at work, been having these headaches all day. It's just been, I've been looking at the computer screen and my eyes are hurting. And instead of you just sitting there thinking about what you're going to say next, what you can do to signal to the examiners that you're being attentive is to go, I see, right. So you've been having headaches. I see, yeah, okay. So your eyes have been a bit sore, right? I see. You're reflecting back what the patient's saying as you're going along, signaling attentiveness. You should also be non-judgmental. This is not usually a problem with anybody. That is, if the patient comes to you and they have something that is you disagree with, maybe they're addicted to cigarettes, maybe they drink too much, maybe they have a false idea about something. Maybe they want to diagnose themselves from their Google search, for example, which you think is stupid, but you're going to be non-judgmental in your observation of that. Okay, so you're not going to be rude to them. You're going to be very understanding, very friendly. Even if what they say is a bit silly, a bit stupid, you're going to say, oh, okay, I see. So you've used Google to search this. Well, listen, I want to be very polite about this, but it's probably not the best idea to find this on Google. I can offer you my professional opinion if you like, something like that. Anyway, be non-judgmental. Here's an example. The doctor says, I can understand that you might not want to stop taking your medication. I can see that. However, etc. Empathy and attentiveness that we spoke about before go hand in hand, and they're pretty much the same thing. One of the ways that you can show empathy throughout the entire role play is by being attentive. Okay, they're one and the same. The more that you listen carefully to your patient, respond appropriately, reflect back what the patient's saying, is going to boost your empathy score as well. Don't just use formulaic phrases like, oh, I'm so sorry to hear that, when showing empathy. That is not scored well by the examiners. In fact, we had an OET examiner working for us. She still does, but she doesn't do OET examining anymore. And she would laugh because she would say, Jay, some of these doctors and nurses, the way they show empathy is terrible, and they would not get a good score. And one of the jokes that she told me was that apparently in one of the role plays, somebody had just had a kidney removed or something, right? So the patient's in a lot of stress. I forget what it was. They'd had their stomach removed or something. And the nurse, in order to show empathy, said, the patient said, look, I've just had my stomach removed. I'm very concerned about this. And the nurse said, oh, no worries, you'll be fine. Said something was just really inappropriate, really not thoughtful, non-emotional, very formulaic. You shouldn't do that. You need to respond in a way that is real and sincere, okay? And not just say, I'm sorry to hear that, okay? Try and make it actually a bit more realistic. One of the ways that you can do that with your formulaic phrases is to say, instead of saying, I'm sorry to hear that, say, I'm sorry to hear that you've been having these headaches. That can be really, that can be a real problem. So you add in the reason why you're sorry to hear that. That will help, okay? But ultimately, attentiveness is the best form of empathy. Here's an example. Doctor says, yes, I can see how stopping taking the medication suddenly might be a bit scary. So put yourself in their shoes. Cool. Let's stop there. Little Q&A. Let's talk about these 4 things here. If you have any questions about what we've just spoken about. Christian, is there a problem if my accent is American? No. Rafia, can we use words like oh dear for politeness? Sure, yeah. Just be sincere. Be sincere, feel it. Abira, can you please also explain how and in which part the test can be different for a veterinarian from a doctor? I haven't dealt with many veterinarians, but one of the role plays the other day somebody told me about was somebody came in because their budgerigar, their little bird, was sick. I have no idea how this works with a veterinarian, I'm sorry. But if you're a vet, what you're doing ultimately is enacting what you would usually do with, I don't know if you'd call them a patient, a customer, I guess, not a customer. You know, you just, this test is based on real life. They created this test around best practice for medical communication. So just pretend that you're in your actual clinic. Zara, if you don't know the patient, how would you ask their name? Can I ask for your name, please? Dr. Osama, could you give us more examples how to show empathy without pretending? Yeah, instead of saying, I'm sorry to hear that you've been having headaches. That can be really overwhelming at times. Also, listen very carefully for little cues that the patient drops, like, I haven't been able to play basketball recently, and say, well, yeah, basketball's important. It's important to keep up your physical or active life. Okay. Again, listening carefully is the key to empathy and responding appropriately. Mira, should I use Mr., Mrs., or Ms. in routine? No, you just ask for their name. If they say my name is Mrs. Smith, then yes, you use Mrs. Smith. If they say my name is J, you just use J. That's it, okay? Mega, if the patient is reluctant, how can I continue? We'll get to that. Christian's got some good ones for empathy. I'm sure that it has been a difficult situation or time for you. I think that's a great way to show empathy. Yeah, exactly. Put yourself in their shoes. All right, let's move on to the next set of criteria. This is incorporating the patient's perspective. Okay, this is the second part here. This refers to several things. Exploring the patient's concerns or ideas. Okay, this is critical. You really want to find out what's going on with the patient. Okay, you really want to find out all their concerns and issues and ideas. You want to pick up on patient cues. We'll talk about that. And then when you're explaining something to the patient, you want to relate your explanation to the patient's concerns. Okay, so this is it's a bit tricky. Let's have a look at this one here, exploring the patient's concerns or ideas. So, all right, what this ultimately means is, so you as the medical professional have your role play card, and the interlocutor has their role play card. Now, what you see is directly related to what the patient has, but the patient's role play card includes a lot of concerns in addition to the medical concerns, right? There's going to be a key medical issue that the patient's facing, but there's also going to be other issues and concerns that the patient has around that medical issue, okay? Yes, I've broken my arm, fine, and I want to find out how long it's going to take to heal and when I can get, but then there's other elements around that. When can I get back to work? When can I start playing basketball again? Am I going to become addicted to painkillers? Okay, so the patient's got the key medical issue plus additional concerns. You need to explore those concerns. You need to find out what they are, and you need to address them for the patient, not just the medical issue. Okay. So for example, the doctor says, am I right in assuming you're a little concerned about stopping your medication? Okay, so try and elicit what's going on with the patient. Next one is you need to pick up on patient cues. So you've got your role play card, I've got mine. Now, and as I mentioned, I will have issues or concerns in addition to the medical issue. For example, let's say one of them is I'm really concerned about, or I mentioned something about not being able to pick up my daughter anymore because of my broken arm. Okay, and it's just a single sentence. we're talking, and then I say, yeah, one of the things that is I can't pick up my daughter at the moment, which is upsetting. Okay, and if you just brush over that and you don't explore that with me, that's a problem. Okay, you need to say, tell me a little bit more about that. Why does that concern you, Jay? And then say, well, she's 4 and whatever. It's a silly example, but basically what I'm saying is the interlocutor is trained to drop in a hint or a cue related to an additional concern, and you need to explore that with the patient. Okay, don't brush over something that the patient says. If the patient mentions they're having a hard time at work, or maybe they're a bit depressed, or whatever it is, you need to explore that with them. Say, tell me a little bit more. You just mentioned something about depression. Can you tell me a little bit about that, please? Okay. I'll skip that one. Okay. Then when you're explaining something, you need to explain it with the patient's concerns in mind. Again, you're not just focusing on the medical issue, you're trying to relate your explanation to the entirety of what the patient's concerned about. Okay, the other issues, the getting back to work, the possible addiction to painkillers, whatever it is. Okay, so you're explaining it with those concerns in mind. We'll skip that. Any questions about these 3 here? Exploring the patient's concerns, picking up on patient cues, and relating explanations to the patient's cues. Can we see our role play card while we are doing the role play? Yes, you get to hold the role play. During the role play, you're holding the role play card, okay? And just on that, what you'll be doing, you're holding the role play card. It's quite complicated. And what you're doing is you're reading it. You're then speaking to the patient, listening carefully, responding appropriately, looking back at the role play card. Sorry, I'll do it later.
No, go do it now.
Hold on 1 second.
Where do I sign?
My apologies. I had to sign a card because the person's here to pick up the card. Okay, any questions? Okay, Mega, this is a great question. In between the role play, or as we're going through the role play, should we be asking the interlocutor or the patient if they have any other concerns? Yes, absolutely. As you're going along and talking to the patient, you're not just giving them information, and we'll talk about this in information giving at the end, but you'll be stopping, pausing, and saying, do you have any concerns about that? Or is that clear? Or is there anything else you would like me to explain about that? That's definitely, you definitely need to do that. Gayatri, is the same rule applied dealing with psychiatric issues? Yes. Yep. Definitely. Yep. You're going to be exploring any concerns, medical, social, psychological, family issues the patient has. You're going to be finding out what's going on. Wilson, is the patient's concerns always related to the tasks, or sometimes could be different of the role play card? No. The patient will be basing all of their concerns on the role play card. And these concerns, the social, the medical, whatever, are written into the role play card. Problem is, you can't see them. Only you see your role play card, and you know that the 2 are related, but you don't know what the other issues are. So that's why you need to be listening carefully and exploring them with the patient. David, is there a possibility to be marked down for over-exploring the patient's concerns? Yes, you don't want to over-explore as well. Good point. You just want to, you have 5 minutes and you have a number of tasks that you need to get through. So you'll sort of know the flow. If you have 5 tasks, you'll be spending about a minute on each task. So, if they drop a concern about They say something like, um, uh, uh, I'm a bit worried about what's going to happen when I go back to work. And you say, oh, tell me why is that a concern for you? And they'll say, well, one of the things that happens at work is I have to sit all day and look at the computer and say, yes, all right, I understand that. One of the things you might think about doing is getting a screen cover for your screen. You've just spent 15 seconds on that, and that's fine. Mira, are these role plays profession specific? Do doctors get doctors' ones, nurses get nurses' ones? Yes, correct. Okay, I'm going to keep general questions to the end. Okay, if you can ask questions about the specific criteria as we go through. At the end, I'll answer more broad questions. Keep pushing through. Keep your questions and keep your general ones to the end. Okay, this one is, what you're marked on here is your ability to provide structure. And this is, I've done, over the last couple of weeks, I've done about a dozen speaking mock tests with doctors and nurses, and very few people provide structure. Okay, so a lot of people lose marks with this one. And this is a gimme, this is easy if you know what to do and if you implement it on test day. Okay, just before we do that, if you wanted to have a thorough speaking session, not just a mock test, but actually sit with one of our expert teachers one-on-one, do a number of role plays, get lots of verbal feedback, then I recommend you book a one-on-one tutorial through the website. You can do it on speaking or writing, listening, reading, whatever, or you can do speaking and reading, for example. But it's 45 minutes one-on-one with an expert who will be really able to help you improve your score by focusing in on specific things that you're doing wrong and right. Mentioning what you're doing right, which is important, but really helping you to improve that which you are getting wrong. Okay. Providing structure. There's a gimme points. You can get points here. Providing structure refers to sequencing the interview, making topic changes clear. We'll talk about each of these in detail, and organizing your explanations. So sequencing the interview is pretty straightforward. What you need to do is follow the tasks sequentially, okay? The role play is created so it steps through the various, it's just sequential, it's logical, it's a reasonable way to go through the role play, because your first task, for example, is to find out what is troubling the patient. The patient's first task is to explain what's going on. Your next task is to reassure the patient and talk about this. The patient's then task is to whatever, they're linked, they're interlinked. So you just follow the tasks sequentially. Sometimes you'll do a little bit of chopping and changing and jumping around. That's fine. And if you miss a task, you can come back. If you miss part of a task, you can ask the patient about it. You can use that role play card strategically to work your way through. What I do recommend, though, is obviously doing some practice. All this sounds very weird and theoretical and abstract. Once you actually do it, you're like, it's a bit like a game. You know how to game it after you've done a couple of these. Okay, this one, no one does, and this one is easy points on test day, okay? You need to make your topic changes clear. Okay, so on your role play card, you got the first task, which is to find out about the patient's symptoms, okay? Second task is to talk about possible recommendations for those symptoms. Okay, so how do you make that topic change clear between finding out about symptoms and then explaining possible medications, whatever it is? You do this, you say, now that we've talked about the symptoms, Mr. Smith, do you mind if we talk about some possible medications? You've just made a transition from task 1 to task 2. It's explicit, it's clear, it's helped stage the role play. Mr. Smith will say, that sounds great. And you've just got yourself a couple of points for making that topic change clear. Now that we've talked about the possible medications, Mr. Smith, I'd like to talk to you briefly about side effects. How does that sound? That sounds fine. Now that we've talked about side effects, I'd like to just make sure that you understand whatever. You see what I'm doing here? You're just making those topic changes explicit and clear. For example, now that we've discussed the symptoms, I'd next like to talk about possible causes. Does that sound okay? And this is where you ask the patient, is that okay? Do you have any concerns about that? Do you mind if we move on? Yes, that's fine. They'll always say yes. Next one is not transitioning between tasks. This one is towards the end of the role play, you'll have to start explaining some stuff, okay? You'll have to explain some stuff in detail. For example, how to apply the topical cream, or when to take the different medications, etc. Something will have to be explained in depth. You need to organize your explanations, okay? First thing you should do, Mr. Smith, is put a little small bit on your finger. Does that make sense? Yes. Okay. Next, what you want to do is then apply that little bit of cream to your hand. Is that clear? Yes. After that, so firstly, secondly, subsequently, etc. You just want to map out your explanations, okay? Make them very logical and clear. So if you think about it broadly, as you step through the tasks, you're making those changes clear. Within a task, you're making those explanations very explicit and clear, okay? Nobody does this. People lose points here all the time. This is a very easy way to get points. Cool. Any questions about providing structure? Here's a relevant question. Sure. What happens if I don't finish the tasks? Will I get a low mark? No, there's nothing in the scoring about must complete the tasks. However, the tasks are created, the role play is created so that it will naturally come to an end at about 5 minutes, okay? If you're exploring the patient's concerns and doing the explanations properly and providing structure, etc., the role play naturally finishes at about 4.5, 5 minutes, okay? Zara, do we have to ask, is it okay or is it clear after each step? Not after every step, but if you explain something and you feel like it was a little bit convoluted or whatever, just say, is that clear? Or if you're saying something that's a little bit possibly controversial, like the patient might need to take medication, do you have any concerns about that, Mr. Smith? Make sure the patient's okay. Make sure the patient understands and make sure the patient's okay to move on. David, are these criteria available online? Yes, if you go to the official OET website, you can download the criteria, the clinic. It's very confusing though. Honestly, it's this big multiple page thing of tables. And one of the things we do well at E2 Language is we make all of that crazy linguistic criteria based stuff accessible and easy and simple, okay? And we teach it. There's a couple of videos in your course on e2language.com. These are not on YouTube. These are scoring related videos about how the scoring works, where I go in depth, like I'm doing today, about each of the criteria. But in short, yes, you can download the official criteria from the OET website. Umbreen, do we need to interrupt the interlocutor if we think they are... No, you should never interrupt the patient. And I think we're getting to that next. Mega, our first task is ask about the history of the patient. How can I structure the sentence for that question? You would say, Mr. Smith, I'd like to find out about your medical history. Is that okay? Okay, so firstly, can you tell me about this condition, how long it's been going on for? Okay, something like that. Tamina, whether we can say okay in between the patient's answers. Fine. Ankita, if we are not able to explain one task nicely, should we jump to the next? No, make sure that you explain the task clearly. Come at it again, say it a different way. If we use okay, two or more, is it good? you want to vary your phrases, okay? So when you say like words like, okay, I see, right, uh-huh. This is a good way. You might want to vary, right, I see, good, okay, uh-huh. That's fine. Do you have any concerns? Is that clear? How do you feel about that? Etc. Then vary those phrases. Yeah, but it doesn't matter if you repeat them more than once. That's cool. Okay, now we're talking about information gathering. This is really about questioning. Okay, and if you think about the role play, or if you look at the role play, what you'll notice is at the beginning of the role play, you'll be doing a lot of information gathering. You'll be asking lots of questions, getting lots of information from the patient. And then in the second half of the role play, you start to give information to the patient. So you're moving from question-based sentences to more just normal, what are they called? Just normal sentences. Okay, so let's talk about information gathering. This refers to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things. Minimizing interruptions. Okay, minimizing interruptions. Asking open questions followed by closed questions. Avoiding compound questions. Clarifying something that the patient said that was unclear or that you said that was unclear. And summarizing. By the way, by this stage, you're probably thinking, how the hell am I going to remember all of this on test day? The answer is most of it will be natural to you. Okay, there's probably nothing in here that or maybe very little that you're hearing that you've never heard before or whatever. But through practicing and through getting feedback, that's how you start to really incorporate all of this stuff into your role play. For example, I noticed when doing these speaking mock tests with doctors and nurses recently, that they were very good. They would come in with, because E2 language is good, they would learn how to, maximize their points on test day. They would come into the speaking mock test, but they would forget some things naturally. And then my job was to say, okay, look, overall very good here, here, and here. However, you didn't do this, this, and this. And they'd say, okay, I see. I'll make sure I do that on test day tomorrow or whenever it was. So feedback's critical. All right, minimizing interruption. This is pretty clear. There's different ways to do this, okay? Allow the patient to speak through the use of silence and pausing, okay? Even if the patient, you're watching on test day, you're watching the patient, they're going to say something, allow them to pause, allow them to speak. Encourage them to speak through, I see. All right, okay. Okay, you're encouraging them to continue on. Echoing and repetition. Chest pain. Okay, so you haven't been coping. Right. I see. Yeah. Again, you're listening, you're being attentive, you're being empathetic, and then paraphrasing and interpretation. So you think you might not cope? Okay, this is really clarifying. The patient's going along, saying something. You want to really understand them. So you just want to rephrase that and say, so you don't think you're coping, or so you don't think you've been taking the right dosage of medication. Is that right? You're clarifying what's going on. So that's how you minimize interruption and really gather a lot of information from the patient. This one people don't do properly. And again, these are easy points. Open questions followed by closed questions. Basically what this is, when you don't want to go in asking yes, no questions. You want to open the patient up and get them talking. So instead of saying, have you been suffering headaches? Yes, no. Don't ask that first. Say, Mr. Smith, can you tell me about these headaches, please? Okay, then he's going to talk about symptoms, etc. They happen twice a day. They happen usually at about 6 in the morning and 6 at night. And then what you do is you move from that open question to a closed question. You say, so they've been happening twice a day? Yes. Okay. And you mentioned they happen sort of in the morning and at nighttime. That's right. Good. So open question, closed question. And really what you're doing here is you're exploring, getting information, and then confirming your understanding. Okay. They're easy. So tell me about your medication use. Open question. Patient says, blah, 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 side effects. So you've been experiencing side effects? Yes. Open, close, open, close. Avoid compound questions. Avoid asking two questions at once. Okay, this is not good. So you're worried about taking too much medication and the possible side effects. No, ask one question at a time. Clarify. If something's unclear. Sorry, I missed what you said there about nervousness. Can you please repeat that for me? Okay, clarify something. Okay. And then summarize. Okay, so let me see if I've got this right. You mentioned that the headaches are happening twice a day, in the morning and the evening, and you've been having vision impairment. Is that right? I sort of contradicted myself there because I sort of asked compound question, but no, that's fine. That's a summary, so that's good. So any questions about minimizing interruption, open, close questions, avoiding asking two questions at once, clarifying and summarizing. Any questions about that? Let me just open up the Q&A. So Khalid's got a question about using signpost language. That was before in providing structure. Signpost language is when you say, okay, firstly, what you want to do is this. After that, you do this. The third thing you do is this. These are signposts, okay? So that's how you provide structure in explanations. Do we need to ask open-ended questions? Would this make the patient uncomfortable? No, it's good. Open questions allow the patient to talk and explain all of their issues. And that's what you want to do. You want to explore the patient's issues. Asha, nope, I've answered that one. Cool. All right, I'm going to skip those ones and I'll go to the chat and have a look. Please explain again about compound questions. Compound questions is when you ask two questions at once. You say, so can you tell me, Mr. Smith, about these side effects? And can you also tell me about what medications you've been taking? You've just lost a point. One question at a time. Tell me about the side effects. Talk about the side effects. Then talk about medication. Okay. Really here with summarizing, what you're doing is you're summarizing to make sure that you've understood what the patient said. So let me get this right, Mr. Smith. You said that, so you've been having headaches. Yes, twice a day. That's correct. Okay, and you haven't been taking medication. No. Okay, I see. Okay, let's move on now and talk about the possible causes of your headaches. Okay, so you're summarizing to confirm your understanding. Mira, this is an interesting one. Best way to question about smoking, drinking habits, or occasional dope smoking. I've never seen a role play card that talks about illicit drugs, but maybe so. If you have to ask about illicit drugs, use the formal term. Don't call it dope or ganja or whatever. Call it marijuana, I guess, would be more appropriate. Clarify. Can you talk about that again? So in clarifying, you want to make sure that you've understood correctly. Okay, so you're saying, okay, so Mr. Smith, you mentioned about your headaches were twice a day. Is that right? Yes. Okay, and they're happening in the morning and the evening. Yes, I see. Okay, so they're closed questions, but you're making sure you've understood what's going on. Cool. All right, let's do the last one here. Information giving. Okay, so this refers to, this is crazy. There's so much criteria. Establishing what the patient knows, pausing when giving information, encouraging the patient to share his or her thoughts, checking whether the patient has understood. We've already talked about a lot of this, by the way, and asking what else you can do. Okay, so again, we've talked about this, but let's just go through it. This one we haven't talked about, establishing what the patient knows. So let's say you're talking to the patient about a possible medication. Just very briefly, you'd say, have you heard of this medication before? No, I haven't. Okay, sure. So what this medication does is, or um, are you aware of the risks of, having this, whatever, just very quickly, just, are you aware of, or do you know about this? Just very briefly, making sure the patient, um, checking to see whether the patient knows what you're talking about or not. Okay. Can be done very quickly, and they're gimme points as well for the examiner. Okay, this one is when giving information, pausing and making sure that the patient has understood. We've talked about this one. So first you need to do this. Is that clear? Yes. Okay. After that, you should do this. Okay. Then, okay, so it's basically just making, instead of just rambling off an explanation, going, okay, first you need to do this, and after that you do that, and then this you do this. Okay. No, make sure the patient's understood when you're giving information. And again, we've talked about this with do you have any concerns about that? Or is that clear? Or do you want me to explain that again? Or is that clear? Encourage the patient to share his thoughts. What do you think? Or do you have any concerns about that? Especially when you're giving explanations, okay? You're pausing and you're making sure the patient's comfortable to move on. Again, checking the patient is understood. Is that clear? Do you have any concerns? Does that make sense? Yes. And then lastly, asking what else you can do. And this really comes at the end of the role play. And let's say you don't know the time because there's no clock in the room and there's no timer. But let's say you've come to the end of the role play, it's naturally ending. The final thing you will say to the patient is, okay, so is there anything else I can do for you today? No, thank you. End of role play. Cool. So that's also a gimme point there. Any questions about information giving? Any questions about information giving? When is the best time to clarify what the patient said? When you want to confirm your understanding of something, okay? When you want to make sure that you've understood what's going on. Or the patient said something unclear, and so you just want to clarify that. Abira, does wrong information count as negative points on the role play? Yeah. Okay, so let's say the role play says something like, I'll make this very simple. The patient needs to stop taking medication, and you say, okay, so you need to continue your medication. That's going to create a problem because my role play card or the interlocutor's role play card isn't about continuing medication, because I have concerns about stopping medication and what if this happens, etc. So try to make sure you've got the information correct on the role play card. And you have 3 minutes to prepare, so you should be able to understand. Read it carefully. Ankita, if we are giving lots of information like lifestyle changes, diet changes, medication, joining a rehabilitation program, how do I ask if the patient is understanding in between? You say, okay, so first thing that we need to think about are some lifestyle changes. How do you feel about that, Mr. Smith? Yep, that sounds okay. Okay, so one of the things is exercise. I definitely like you to do at least 30 minutes of exercise per day. Do you have any concerns about that? Well, what about my heart? Your heart will be fine, blah, blah, blah. Okay, let's now talk about diet. How is your diet? Open question. Yeah, it's not too bad. Do you eat much red meat? Closed question, etc. So you know how to do this. You know how to do it. Chuchi, is there any specific time frame that we need to end the role play? No, again, 5 minutes. It will naturally come to an end around the 4.5 minute mark, 5 minutes. If you're still speaking, the examiner will stop you at 5 minutes. That's fine. Okay. That doesn't mean you've done something wrong. They have to stop you mid-sentence at 5 minutes. Not a problem. It's not an issue. You will not lose points. Okay. Just Rakshana, when is the best time to give information? Yeah, as I mentioned, usually at the beginning of the role play, you'll be gathering information and exploring the patient's concerns. Towards the end of the role play, you'll start to provide recommendations, suggestions, advice, etc. That's how the role plays are constructed. Asha, in the case of a home visit, do we need to confirm the home address? Not necessarily. If the task says that, then yes, but otherwise no. Subiksha, how to check whether the patient has understood? Is that clear? Do you have any concerns about that? Does that make sense? Little phrases like that. Susan, while talking, we don't know how much time has passed. Is there a wall clock? No, usually not. Maybe in your test center, but just assume not. So again, this is why practice is critical, because one of the things you don't want to do is just quickly burn through the tasks and finish at 1 minute and 50 seconds. That's not good because you haven't explored the patient's concerns. You haven't expressed enough language. You want to try to get to 5 minutes so the examiners have a good range of your language in order to mark you on. No, if you don't finish the tasks, you are not penalized. Cool. One of the things I strongly recommend you do again is take our mini mock test. I think you can buy the Express Plus package. I forget how much it is. I think it's 50, it's about $50 US. That comes with writing feedback. That's one of our experts will provide you with writing feedback and a one-on-one 15-minute speaking mock test, which will simulate the real thing, okay, with feedback, in addition to the reading test, the listening test, etc. Pretty good value for money if you consider that the OET test itself is about $500. This is a really good, and I can't say it's a guarantee, but it's what you want to do is make a mistake on the $50 test, okay? You don't want to make a mistake on the $500 test. That's for sure. So this is the one where you go in, screw this one up. That's the plan because you're going to learn from your feedback. So on test day, you don't screw it up. And if you're watching this on YouTube, please click the subscribe button, come across to e2language.com. You can sign up for free. There's 2 live classes per week for free. If you're a paid member, there are 12 live classes per week for free. More, maybe more, twice a day. These are excellent classes that take you through all the different aspects of reading and listening and writing, etc. It's a very good idea to come across and start preparing on e2language.com. Cool. Will they deduct marks if I fail to summarize at the end? No, you can do a summary at the end if you want. Oops, the Express Plus package is $69. Thanks, Susan. Choi Lin, I took the mini mock test and I wrote granddaughter, one word. No, I put grand-daughter, which was considered wrong. You still got it right. Okay, that's fine. In listening part A, spelling is not a problem. And it is actually marked by humans. And so little variations, if you spell the word wrong or you put a hyphen, etc., it will still be considered correct. So that's fine, Choi Lin. Christian, are we going to do this with the writing part? This workshop was great. Thanks, Christian. Yes, next week we'll do the writing workshop. Okay, we'll focus on writing. But I really recommend coming to the live classes for doctors and nurses on writing because it's not just a lecture. You actually write. You're looking at model letters. You learn how to structure up a good purpose statement, etc. I too have questions about my writing correction. Please, if you have any questions, you can email hello@e2language.com. After I take the mock test on E2 language, when will I get my results? 24 to 48 hours, usually about 24 hours. Caroline, first time at an E2 language workshop, great experience. Thanks, Jay. Thanks, Caroline. How can I buy materials for reading and listening? e2language.com. You get 6 full practice tests with model letters, transcripts, everything to help you out. Not just that, just be careful. Also, some of the stuff that is on YouTube or for free in the Google Drives is junk, absolute junk. Those questions and those case notes and stuff are really, some of them, not all, but you don't know which ones, are really poor quality, really poor quality. Some of them I can't find out what the answer is because there's either no answer, there's 2 answers, it's just a really poorly written question. You have no idea what it means. Just be careful with what material you're using to practice with. Not all materials are created equally, okay? E2 Languages is high quality, top quality. We actually use ex-OET question writers who used to actually write for the real test. And of course, the OET official material is excellent. The rest of it, I don't know. Just be careful. Cool. All right, I'm exhausted and I'm going to finish my coffee. Thanks very much for coming along. I appreciate it. If you have any questions, email hello@e2language.com. But really, everything I know, everything all our experts know is on e2language.com. It's all in there for you to learn and prepare for your test properly. Thanks for coming along. I will see you soon.